welcome back to my channel. Today I am back in the kitchen because we are gonna work on a holiday meal. Now this meal, there's gonna be a lot of experimenting going on because I wanna challenge myself to do traditional recipes with like a lower calorie, high protein twist to them. So a little healthier, but packs a lot of flavor. And if they turn out amazing, then we can use them for the actual holidays next time. I'm not gonna do turkey, but I want to try something that I haven't before, and that is smaller Cornish game hens. I'm gonna do a couple of those roasted in the oven, and I'm gonna be making a homemade gravy using the roasted vegetables underneath the Cornish hens. I also wanna do a pork rind bread stuffing, which I have never heard of or tried, but we are gonna experiment on it today and hope for the best. I'm gonna be doing some herb Parmesan mashed potatoes. Also a high protein version of mac and cheese today. I need to have something green on the table, so I am gonna throw in a really quick and simple strawberry, spinach, and arugula salad. For the bread portion of our meal, I'm gonna be doing a cottage cheese high protein cornbread. So we got a ton to do. Let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start by getting our Cornish game hens in the oven. So I just have my roasting pan here, and earlier I went ahead and prepped all of my veggies. So I'm gonna throw in some big chunks of carrots. I have big onion chunks. I wanna do carrots, onion, and celery because we will use these vegetables once they're nice and soft from roasting. I want to puree them to help act as a thickener for my gravy. With the celery, I'm gonna add the celery leaves that came on top of those stalks. I also have some sprigs of fresh thyme and some fresh rosemary. I just clipped this from my front yard. We have rosemary bushes here, and I already washed and dried them. And I want to add a few pats of butter right on top, just like this. And I want to do a nice splash of wine. I'm just using what I have in my fridge right now, which is Pinot. Nice splash on there. And the reason I want to add the wine in now is because, like I said, since we're going to use this as our gravy, use this to help thicken our gravy, I want it to be very flavorful as well. Right. Looks beautiful so far. Now I'm going to add in my roasting rack, just nestle it right on top. For my Cornish hens, I've already rinsed and pat these dry. I have two. I also removed the neck and the cavity is clear. Now for these, I'm just gonna add a light layer of avocado oil on each and massage that everywhere. And I'm just gonna take a couple of those veggies and stuff the back cavity, just like that. Same with this one. And these two are stuffed with some veggies and herbs. And wash my hands. And for these, I'm just gonna season it with the seasonings that I know that we like. So I'm gonna do some salt on there. This is just some KC sweet seasoning. Pretty liberally. I wanted to do these nice and simple. Onion and herb, paprika, some garlic, a little bit of rubbed sage because I don't have fresh on me right now, so this should be fine, and pepper. And I'm gonna do a little more oil and massage that in. And I have my oven set for 375 right now. And we're gonna be roasting this for about an hour and a half until we reach temp. And that's it, nice and simple. Let's get these in the oven. Okay, now I wanna get started on my herb Parmesan mashed potatoes. So first, I'm just gonna take some russet potatoes because they're a nice starchy potato, and get these peeled and boiling in some salted water. Okay, now we're just gonna cut up our peeled potatoes. Now, typically, when I've made mashed potatoes in the past for holidays, and for us in my family, mashed potatoes is a must. I'm used to putting cream cheese in mine, softened cream cheese, because it makes them so creamy and delicious. But since we're trying to do these, I'm not following a recipe, I'm just kind of going with my intuition here. I'm going to try and pack in a lot of flavor, which is why I want to do an herbed Parmesan mashed potato. So I'm going to be using things like chicken bone broth for flavor. I'll be, of course, adding milk, but milk that has more protein content in it. And a lot of the herbs should really help out with the flavor punch in this. Potatoes themselves are actually quite low calorie for the volume that you can get in a serving. So I hate to leave potatoes out, so I won't do that, but we are gonna experiment with making them a little higher protein today. So I have all my potatoes chopped up. I'm gonna get these in some cold salted water and boiling on the stove. Okay, now while we have our potatoes working on the stove, I don't wanna waste any time because we have so much to do. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started on my cornbread batter. Now this recipe, like I said, is a higher protein recipe for traditional cornbread. And that's because we're using cottage cheese in this. And this recipe uses grams. So we're gonna do 120 grams of just some regular all-purpose flour. And then for our yellow cornmeal, we're gonna do the same ratio. So another 120 grams. I'm gonna do an 1/8 teaspoon of salt, which is just a pinch. 5 grams of baking powder. And we'll do 3 grams of baking soda. And just give that a stir and set this aside. Now for my wet ingredients, I'm gonna do 120 milliliters of milk. Again, I'm using my Fairlife milk, which packs a lot of protein in it, 13 grams of protein per serving. That's about 120. I'm gonna add in 1 egg. No shell. And I'm gonna do 60 milliliters of oil. The original recipe uses olive oil. I'm using avocado because that's what I have on hand. And I'm gonna do 60 grams of syrup. The recipe asks for maple. I'm just using my sugar-free, 0-calorie pancake syrup. It works just as good. So I'm gonna add in 60 in there. And last, my cottage cheese, 113 grams. This cottage cheese is already whipped. I just threw the whole container into my blender beforehand and whipped the entire thing. That way it doesn't have the lumps. You can see it's nice and smooth. And 113 grams. And give that a mix. Now I'm just gonna get my wet mixture into my dry, pour that in. And give that a stir. Now this cornbread, it's not gonna have a ton of sweetness in it, which I prefer, and that's only because I like to do, once it's done baking, a nice drizzle of honey right on top of each slice, and it tastes so, so good, cornbread and honey. And I'm just gonna take an 8x8 baking dish and grease this with some butter, and we'll get the batter in. Make sure we get it all in there and just smooth it out to the edges. And this cornbread is gonna go in a 400-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. That's ready. Okay, now we're gonna get started on our pork rind stuffing. Now, because I haven't made this recipe before and I was a little sketch about it, I'm only gonna make half the recipe today. So I just have this bag of original style pork rinds, and I'm going to crunch these up and get about a cup's worth of crumbs. And so what we're gonna do first is make the actual bread loaf for the stuffing recipe. So this will need to go in the oven first before we actually put together the stuffing. And if you're not familiar with pork rinds, they're very crunchy, salty. chip or snack, but I grew up with these in my house because my dad would eat them all the time, so I'm very familiar with pork rinds. I still eat them today. They're also really low carb and high protein for the amount that you get. I'm also going to do 1 cup of mozzarella shredded cheese, and this is fat-free cheese, so it has a higher protein to calorie content. And I'm going to do 2 whole eggs, half a tablespoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of light sour cream. But for this recipe, I think you can use light or original. That's it for this bread. Let me get that mixed together. Okay, now you're gonna place this into a greased loaf pan. I just have a little 6-inch pan here that I'm going to place this in. I'm just gonna smooth this out, just like that. And I'm gonna put this into a 450-degree oven for about 20 minutes or so. All right, I got my hens out of the oven. Do a quick temp check on the thighs. Yep, these are ready. I'll get some of the juices at the bottom of the pan here and start spooning them right on top. Okay, so I went ahead and took out my chicken rack and tented it with some foil. Now the roasted vegetables down here, I'm actually going to put back into the oven because I need these super, super tender, like almost mushy, before we puree them up for our gravy. So we're gonna get these in while everything else is still cooking. Now for the liquids that are gonna go in my mashed potatoes. Again, I'm using my Fairlife milk because it has high protein in it. I'm also going to use unsalted chicken bone broth. Bone broth adds a lot of flavor and protein. This is 9 grams of protein per 1 cup serving, which is only 50 calories. And then I just have about 1 to 2 tablespoons worth of butter that I'm gonna get melting together on the stove. And again, we're trying to put a lot of flavor into our mashed potatoes. So I do have my Parmesan cheese, which has a lot of protein. Specifically, Parmesan cheese does pack a lot of protein in it. And I just have some sprigs of fresh thyme, fresh rosemary, and I have some chopped up parsley that I prepped earlier today. So I want this to be a nice herby mashed potato. I'm not really going off of a recipe, but I'm sure lots of people have done this. I'm gonna get these fresh herbs and get them all slightly chopped, and we'll kind of add them in towards the end with our cheese as like a finisher. Now I've just added some salt and pepper to my potatoes just to start the seasoning process, and I'm gonna get these mashed up. Now I have my liquid mixture melted up. I'm just gonna pour in just a bit at first, and we'll keep continuing to stir and pour in as we need it, just like that. And the reason why I wanted to warm up my mixture first is I'm trying to prevent my mashed potatoes from getting too gummy. Add a little more. Hopefully trying to achieve a nice creamy, fluffy potato. Now we're gonna go in with our Parmesan cheese, a nice generous amount. And I'm gonna do a nice dollop of our Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is gonna add a lot of protein to this as well. And I substitute Greek yogurt for sour cream. So it would just be like putting sour cream to help cream your mashed potatoes. Mix that in. And Greek yogurt, just like sour cream, has a bit of tartness to it. These are looking really good. Now I'm gonna go in with some of my fresh thyme and rosemary and a nice pinch of my chopped parsley. Give that a mix. These are nice and fluffy. I'm gonna give it a little taste. It has some good flavor. We're just gonna go a little heavier on the salt and pepper. And we are done. All right, I just pulled my pork rind loaf out of the oven. It looks great. Now I want to let this cool completely and set aside. Okay, we are now going to get started on our high protein mac and cheese. So I'm going to start off with these elbow noodles. This is the Bonza brand, made from chickpeas. I promise it does not taste like chickpeas if you haven't tried these before, but it has 3 times the fiber of regular pasta and a lot more protein. So rather than boiling this on the stove in water, I'm going to cook the pasta in chicken bone broth. So I'm gonna add 32 ounces of that nice protein-packed bone broth. I'm gonna get this heating on the stove. All right, and while that's starting to heat on the stove, to my blender, I'm gonna add 2 cups of cottage cheese. Again, cottage cheese is gonna give us that added protein. And I have not made this recipe before specifically, but in any recipe I add cottage cheese in, you can never taste it. And I'm gonna do 1 tablespoon of garlic is in the recipe. I'm actually gonna add more like closer to 2 because I have it. I'm gonna do 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast. So this is something that's gonna add like a cheesy flavor. And for each serving is only 40 calories with 5 grams of protein. And I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of onion powder and some salt. This I'm just gonna eyeball, as well as pepper. And I'm also gonna throw in some paprika as well. Now we're gonna get this blended up. All right, I just pulled cornbread out of the oven. It's done. I'm gonna let this sit out and warm for a bit, and then when I slice it up is when I'll drizzle our honey. You can see our pasta and bone broth is boiling. I'm gonna wait till it absorbs more of this liquid before we add in our blender mixture here. Okay, you can see a lot of our liquid's been absorbed. I'm gonna go ahead and add our blended mixture in here. I'm gonna stir that in. It should start to get nice and creamy. And at this point, I'm gonna add about 3/4 cup of cheddar cheese. Get that mixed in. I'm using fat-free cheddar just to help lower the calories and add more protein. And we're just gonna let this melt and sit together on the stove for a bit. All right, now that our stuffing pork rind loaf is completely cooled, we are going to cut it up into cubes, but first I want to get melting on the stove 2 tablespoons of butter. And I'm just going to take my loaf and cut it up into cubes with a serrated knife. Now I already snagged a little piece of this loaf. It's actually really good. Like, it has good flavor in it. All of that cheese, and plus I love the flavor of pork rinds. It has some really great flavor. I know that people make this just to have as a bread loaf, and I can see why. Don't knock pork rinds until you try them. My butter's melted, so I'm just gonna add 1/2 cup of chopped up onion, celery, and mushrooms to the pan. Okay, my veggies are pretty soft now in this butter. I'm just going to finish it with about a tablespoon of parsley. Fresh parsley in there, and turn off the heat and let this cool before we add it to our bread. All right, now to finish off my stuffing, I'm gonna add my cubed up loaf, my bowl here, and then I also have 1 beaten egg that I'm gonna pour right on top. And I have 1/2 cup of my chicken bone broth. And remember, I'm only doing a half recipe here, so I'm going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon only of all of my seasonings. So this is some rubbed sage in here. I have some poultry seasoning. I'll do 1/4 teaspoon of that. I also have my fresh thyme. I'm gonna break that in, and I'm gonna do about 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. Give that a little mix. I also have my softened vegetables with butter I'm gonna add in here. And I'm gonna give that a mix. Make sure everything is nice and coated with my seasonings. My lightly buttered baking dish. And I'm going to put this in a 375-degree oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. And I like my stuffing to have a lot of crispy edges. So I chose this pan to get it a little bit on the flatter side so I can get more of that crispiness. It's ready for the oven. All right, I think now is a good time to prep my salad. So I just have some organic baby spinach and arugula mixture. This is gonna be super simple. And I've already sliced up some strawberries I'm gonna add in there. And earlier I've already prepped my red onions and I just went ahead and did them in slices. So I want to add those over the top as well. I love red onion. And I chopped up some pecans earlier. If you watched my holiday treats video, you saw that I have a whole bag of pecans right now. So that's gonna be my nut of choice in this salad. Those were in halves, that bag, so I just went ahead and cut them into pieces. Let me add a few more. And then for my dressing, I'm gonna go the easy routes and use this G. Hughes sugar-free poppy seed dressing. I love this dressing. It works really well, especially in salads that have like a fruit and nut combo in them. So good. So I'm just gonna grab my spoon and do a little toss. And I don't want to drown it in dressing, just enough to get our arugula and spinach kind of moistened, I guess. And I'm just gonna let this hang out and kind of marinate in the fridge a bit while we're finishing up. And that is it. Super simple salad, strawberry, spinach and arugula salad, and we're done. Now for my gravy, I went ahead and took my drippings from my Cornish hens and put it at the bottom of my saucepan here with a little pat of butter. I've pulled out my roasted vegetables from my pan and I added a healthy splash of chicken stock, so we're gonna blend this up. All right, we got our drippings bubbling up, so I'm gonna add my chicken bone broth. Turn up the heat to medium and kind of get this boiling again. And I have my roasted vegetable mixture all blended up in my blender here. I'm going to add this into my gravy to help thicken it and add all of that flavor in. And we'll just keep checking it and stirring it till we get to the thickness that we like. Okay, now while I have my gravy simmering and thickening, I'm gonna add just a touch of my thyme, a little pinch of fresh parsley in there, and we'll let this keep working. All right, I got my pork rind stuffing out of the oven now. I did leave it in for about 10 minutes longer because I wanted it to be crispier on the tops. So I think we achieved that. I'm gonna go ahead and set this out. All right, everyone, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me. Take a look at our finished meal here. I'm so glad we decided to do the Cornish hens this year instead of the turkey because they came out very, very juicy. I was really happy with them. The mac and cheese, I am on the fence on. I didn't think that the flavor was quite there, but my husband liked it. So I may try and remake it again, but using a different method. As for my pork rind stuffing, it definitely turned out better than I thought it did. I preferred it on the crispier side. My husband prefers it on the softer side. So overall, the flavor was there. I was happy with how our gravy turned out. It did have a very strong flavor coming from the vegetables. Next time I might try to add even more of the chicken or meat juices to give it a stronger chicken flavor, but still it was very flavorful and very good. And I'm very happy that I chose to bring in the strawberry spinach arugula salad in there to really add some freshness to brighten up this meal. My cottage cheese cornbread, I have made it before in the past. I always love it, it's really good, especially with the drizzle of honey to add a little bit of sweetness. overall, I'm so glad that we tried these recipes. Let me know if you like this one, if you learned anything from it. If you enjoy my home cooking videos, make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of the ones that are gonna come out soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.